on this.
Okay, we are starting chapter 8. I'd like to start with a comment. I made a mistake, I think it was last week.
Yeah,
A comment that-
kind of went away, didn't they?
Yeah.
Here. Can you hear us? How's it working now?
No.
Guys?
Good.
Okay. Okay, little technical glitch or technician working it out. But anyway, as I started to say, last week I made a comment that after thinking about it, reflecting on it, I probably need to address it. I said the fourth beast had not appeared yet because there's no consensus in the Christian community by the scholars and the guys who do that for a living. So therefore, it probably hasn't happened because there isn't a wide consensus. And then I got to thinking later. The consensus in Noah's time was that it's not going to rain and you don't need a boat. He was the only one that knew the truth. So having a consensus is not a requirement to finding the truth.
Yeah.
One man, Job, was kind of left high and dry with his friends and acquaintances. By consensus, Job was a sinner and should go to hell. So I probably put too much emphasis on, well, if there's no consensus, it's not true. That's not always the case. So we have to look for the truth as wherever we can find it and seek our own understanding. Like Wayman said in his prayer, God gives us the truth. We ask him for. So anyway, I didn't like the way I said that after I said it. So today we start with Daniel chapter 8. Remember now we switched languages back to Hebrew. So we assumed that the primary audience Daniel was addressing was the Jewish people and community. And it starts out with verse 1, in the third year of the reign of Belshazzar, the king, a vision appeared to me, Daniel, subsequent to the one which appeared to me previously. Okay, so we're doing time leaps here. If you actually, in Daniel 7:1, it was the first year of Belshazzar. So now we're in the third year. So we're about 2 years later, approximately. The Babylonian Empire is still intact, and we're about 550 BC. This is before the handwriting on the wall. So therefore, if you actually wanted to put it where it should be in Daniel, according to chronological order, it should be before chapter 5, because the dream happened before chapter 5. And if you think about it now, you can understand why when he saw the handwriting on the wall, he immediately knew what was going on. Oh, well, the Medo-Persians are going to throw you out and take over, because he had already had this dream. We didn't know that at the time we read chapter 5. But so anyway, this is before Belshazzar's death. And so the time, that's the time period we're in. Now, verse 2, I looked in the vision, and while I was looking, I was in the citadel of Susa, which is in the province of Elam. And I looked in the vision, and I myself was beside the Ulai Canal. I looked for that, and couldn't find it in current or old references. The citadel of Susa, that area, I could see, it's about 20 miles from the Iraq-Iran border. And we flew up that eastern border quite a bit while I was in Iraq. So I saw it from a distance, but I never flew directly over the area. It's a pretty desolate area. It wasn't that much to look at. But anyway, that was the place of several Bible settings and stories Daniel's mentioned it, Ezra mentioned it, and Esther, the whole first chapter of Esther was regarding the citadel of Susa. So it's where the Persian Empire arose. And if you remember in Nehemiah, when he was the cupbearer of the king, and his brothers came from Judah and told him about all the problems and how horrible it was there and all that, and he set up a rescue mission and asked the king if he could go, and actually gave him money to do it and all that. That was in the citadel of Susa. That's where he was the cupbearer at. So it was a prominent place in that time.
Does it exist now? It does not exist.
The Kush area exists, and there's settlements and cities, but there's no citadel of Susa that I can find. So anyway, that's where we're at. That's when we're at. Now, one thing that Nehemiah, when he did the rescue mission, was about 445 BC. So that's about 106 years later. So at this time, we're still in the Babylonian, and then it's going to be 106 years later before Nehemiah starts rebuilding the wall around Jerusalem. Okay, verse 3. Then I lifted my eyes and looked, and behold, a ram which had two horns was standing in front of the canal. Now the two horns were long, but one was longer than the other one. With the longer one coming up last. I saw the ram butting westward and northward and southward, and no beasts could stand before him, nor was there anyone to rescue from his power, but he did as he pleased and magnified himself. We'll find later that we have a specific reference, but for now, think of the horns, the unequal horns, kind of like the bear. The bear was lifted up on one side was more prominent than the other. This ram has two horns, one bigger than the other, one more powerful than the other. So there's a parallel there. And this ram was the most powerful thing in the pasture, in the world. It was conquering every other animal that appeared. Verse 5, while I was observing, behold, a male goat was coming from the west over the surface of the whole earth without touching the ground, and the goat had a conspicuous horn between his eyes. Again, we'll find a specific reference in a few verses down, but for now, think of this goat that's coming from the west over the surface of the whole earth, but without touching the ground. There was a leopard in his first dream that had 4 wings. So a leopard with 4 wings could cover the whole earth without touching the ground. Evidently, this goat has the same kind of ability with one great horn, which would tend to make you think a single powerful king. Verse 6. He came up to the ram that had the 2 horns, which I was standing in front of the canal, which I had seen standing in front of the canal, and rushed at him in his mighty wrath. I saw him come beside the ram, and he was enraged, and he struck the ram and shattered his 2 horns, and the ram had no strength to withstand him. So he hurled him to the ground and trampled on him, and there was none to rescue the ram from his power. So we've had a major transition here. One kingdom, one beast conquers the other, tramples him down, destroys him, and replaces him. So this is a transition between one empire to another. Then he goes on in verse 8. Then the male goat magnified himself exceedingly, but as soon as he was mighty, the large horn was broken, and in its place there came up 4 conspicuous horns towards the 4 winds of heaven. Out of one of them came forth a rather small horn, which grew exceedingly great towards the south, towards the east, and towards the beautiful land. Now we'll get into more detail a little bit further down, but I'll give you an overview here. The goat, which is the Grecian Empire, has the mighty horn, which is Alexander the Great. He swept through the world, if you remember, and took over the whole world in 4 years. So he was flying through the world, taking over. And then the large horn was broken off. Alexander the Great died. He's gone. And then his generals divided up the kingdom into 4. So you have 4 smaller horns. And then from the four are replaced by 1, which grows up. And we'll talk about who he is later. But that's a king that replaces the other 4. So this is the Grecian Empire, and it now dominates the known world. And if you go back to the Medo-Persian rule, if you remember, the temple has been desecrated under the Babylonians, but then Cyrus actually lets the Israelites go back and actually helps them financially to rebuild the temple. And so the Persians weren't, they weren't horrible masters. They pretty much let the Jews go ahead and practice their religion and worship their God, but they didn't interfere too much. This Grecian Empire is just the opposite. They are horrible masters. They actually desecrate the temple worse than the Babylonians ever thought about doing. And we'll get into some of the specifics of that in a minute. But right now we're in this Grecian Empire, which was a pretty bad thing, and he describes it in the next few verses. The beautiful land, just as a side note, references Judea, where the beautiful people come from. So in verse 10, it grew up to the host of heaven and caused some of the host and some of the stars to fall to the earth, and it trampled them down. It even magnified itself to be equal with the commander of the host, and it removed the regular sacrifice from him, and the place of his sanctuary was thrown down. And on account of transgression, the host will be given over to the horn, along with the regular sacrifice, and it will fling truth to the ground and perform its will and prosper. So the Greeks are now ruling with great persecution, and it even causes some of the devout worshipers of God to turn against God, to sacrifice God to the Greek idols and gods. The whole people of Israel is compromised to a point. The priesthood, the Jewish priesthood, was compromised. Many of them were taken down, as it says here. Some of the stars fall to the earth and they're trampled down. Many of the priests took bribes, and some of them were even killed and replaced by who the Greeks thought should be in charge of the temple and the worship services. And in the year 167 BC, an idol was set up to Zeus, and Zeus was the only one the Jews were allowed to worship in their temple. So God was completely removed from the temple, from the worship services, from the sacrifices. And that's what these verses are describing in terms of the. You looking something up for us, Glenn?
I was trying to see if there's a footnote on the stars, trying to see what it says, but I'm in the wrong book, so it doesn't help.
Anyway, this is a time of great tribulation and suffering to those who love God. It was not a good day. You had two choices: either suffer on a daily basis, or to reject God and get along with the Greek program and become. In fact, you could say that the Greeks were so dominating, it was almost like being politically correct. You had to be politically correct. You had to be woke in the Grecian culture, or you were a dog that shouldn't even be fed. That was your two choices. Not too unlike today, except much more violent. Okay, so hopefully we'll end it on a less depressing note. But verse 13. Then I heard a holy one speaking, and another holy one said to that particular one who was speaking, "How long will the vision about the regular sacrifice apply, while the transgression causes horror, so as to allow both the holy place and the host to be trampled?" He said to me, "For 2,300 evenings and mornings, then the holy place will be properly restored." So this is, we talked earlier in Daniel about the 3.5 years. Well, if you take 2,300 evenings and mornings, that's 1,150 days, which works out to be almost exactly 3.5 years. So we have, we have the times, and half a time. Now we find out it's exactly 2,300 evenings and mornings. That's pretty specific. That's not a should be somewhere around, kind of like, it gives us a pretty hard number to work with here. And it says that the persecution will be ended at that time. At that time, it will end. And on December 14th, 164 BC, the temple was rededicated to the worship of God, which the Jews now celebrate as Hanukkah. It's when the temple was restored to God's service, and the candles burned for 8 days with no oil, which was the miracle that got us the candelabra with 9 candles, one of which to light the 8 that stayed lit. So we have restoration, at least temporarily, at least to some degree. The tribulations of that time are over. Of course, this was still way in the future, not something that Daniel's going to get to see. But he knows that they're going to suffer mightily before they get there. So it's still depressing to him, just like it would be to us if we knew our grandkids were going to have to go through. Oh, wait a minute. I want to think about what our grandkids are going to have to go through.
Yeah.
So. Okay, then verse 15, it reads, "When I, Daniel, had seen the vision, I sought to understand it, and behold, standing before me was one who looked like a man, and I heard a voice of a man between the banks of Ulai, and he called out and said, 'Gabriel, give this man an understanding of the vision.' So he came near to me where I was standing, and when he came, I was frightened and fell on my face. But he said to me, 'Son of man, understand that the vision pertains to the time of the end.' Now, while he was talking with me, I sank in a deep sleep with my face to the ground. But he touched me and made me stand upright. He said, 'Behold, I'm going to let you know what will occur at the final period of the indignation, for it pertains to the appointed time of the end.'" if I was seeing this in a dream, I would have the same kind of reaction. I would probably try to hide in the closet or fall down, pass out. I mean, he's seeing some pretty, some pretty shocking things, and he has yet to be given an explanation. So he's confused as well as amazed at what he's seeing. And again, we have Gabriel specifically identified this time in the form of a man. And in a way, he's saying, hey, you know, this isn't going to happen to you. This is something that's going to happen in the future. This is going to happen to other people. So don't be afraid. Go ahead, stand up, listen to the explanation. I'm going to tell you what's going to happen so that you can record it, so that you can relay it to those who it may happen to. So here we go. Verse 20, it says, the ram which you saw with the two horns represents the kings of Media and Persia. So now we know, it's clear. There's no ambiguity here. He just comes right out and says it. It also ties us back to the silver shoulders of Nebuchadnezzar's original statue and the bear that Daniel's first dream had. So it ties those three together. So now we have a direct connection. In verse 21, the shaggy goat represents the kingdom of Greece, and the large horn that is between his eyes is the first king. So again, this gives us an exact reference to what's happening. And the goat is the Grecian Empire. The horn is Alexander the Great. Verse 22, the broken horn and the four horns that arose in its place represent the four kingdoms which will arise from his nation, although not with his power. So this talks about Alexander the Great's passing and the military commanders dividing the empire. Now, this is hundreds of years before it happens. Amazing clarity, amazing definition.
Detail.
Verse 23. In the latter period of their rule, when the transgressors have run their course, a king will arise, insolent and skilled in intrigue. His power will be mighty, but not by his own power. He will destroy to an extraordinary degree and prosper and perform his will. He will destroy mighty men and holy people. And through his shrewdness, he will cause deceit to succeed by his influence, and he will magnify himself in his heart. And he will destroy many while they are at ease. He will even oppose the prince of princes, but he will be broken without human agency. He's going to meet his end. This is commonly, most people think that this refers to Antiochus IV, who called himself Epiphanes, which means God manifest. He literally named himself God. So when you say my name, say Roy God. That, you know, this is blasphemous, self-grandizing as you can get. Anyway, he lived from 215 BC to 164 BC. And he was not the rightful successor. He basically came to power through shenanigans and deceit and
Trickery.
trickery. So, and he was responsible for the worst of the persecution that covered the verses that we talked about back in verse 10 to 12. He was the guy in charge. He was king for almost 50 years, and all 50 years was pretty bad things. Verse 26, the vision of the evenings and mornings, which has been told is true, but keep this vision secret, for it pertains to many days in the future. This is talking about the 2,300 evenings and mornings and the 3.5 year time period from verse 14. But he's saying here, it kind of sounds, but keep the vision secret, for it pertains to many days in the future. And that's a difficult verse to transcribe, because I saw different wordings that make it sound better. This makes it sound like don't ever tell anybody, keep it a secret. Well,
Can
it's
I
not.
read mine?
Yeah.
But seal up the vision, for it has to do with and belongs to the future, a now distant future.
So
Seal it up.
yeah, seal it up. Keep it, meaning don't let it be forgotten. It's not to be kept a secret. And here's part of maybe why the wording's tricky, because it's also saying that doesn't start today. In other words, 2,300 mornings and nights, that doesn't start tomorrow. That's sometime in the future. So it doesn't pertain to us today. It pertains to somebody in the future. At some point, the 3.5 years will start and then end at that time in the future, but not today. So don't forget about it, but it's not for us to understand, or not to us to see today. Then I, Daniel, was exhausted and sick for days. Then I got up again and carried on the king's business, went back to work. But I was astounded at the vision, and there was none to explain it. Well, he got some explanations, but I guess he might be, why? Why do we have to go through all this? We thought we were going to get a Messiah who was going to make us the ruling kingdom of earth. And now we've got a whole lot of stuff to go through before we ever get there. And the why is not explained. And so he's given a pretty dark and disturbing picture of the future, and one that portends much distress. But then he gets up and goes back to work like we all do. You get disappointments and bad things happen. Mike still gets up and goes to work. Even though he's been dealing with cancer now for a long period of time. Okay, but out of Romans 8:18, Paul gives us a reference that I think will help, whether it's us, whether it's them, whether it's the people who end up in the end of times. Paul said, "For I consider that the sufferings of this present time are not worthy to even be compared with the glory that is to be revealed to us." So no matter what you have to go through, I mean, think of the final destination, and it doesn't really matter. In fact, sometimes when I pray for my grandkids to be godly people, to want to serve God and love God. And I pray for their grandkids and their grandkids and their grandkids. I want every one of my descendants who are still there when Jesus comes back to be strong enough in faith and confidence in God that they will be able to withstand the persecutions and times that they will have to go through. Because there's only three possibilities. Your lineage dies out and there's no male to carry it on, or they fall away from God, or they're going to be there being in the tribulation before Jesus comes and rescues them. So I pray for that last option. I pray for my descendants to suffer the tribulation, because I want all my generations to love and serve God all the way up till Jesus returns.
Sure.
Now, it might be my grandkids, I don't know, but it may be 100 generations from now.
I heard a pastor say the other night at a revival that Southern Baptists are saying that it takes
I remember you saying that.
three families and three
Three
generations.
generations.
It takes three families to produce one Christian.
one highly devoted.
Yes, yeah.
Mhm.
The third generation, 3 families produce one.
That's a stat.
That's scary.
Wow.
Well,
So that's what you should be praying for those grandchildren.
yeah,
Absolutely.
well, and all the Christians at that
Yes,
time, you know, we look
yes.
at the Christians today in the world, those in Africa, those in the Middle
Yes.
East, those in Afghanistan, those in Iran, those, I mean, we have Christians that are going
The
through,
ones recently
As much.
abducted.
Yeah.
How many was it? 12?
in Haiti.
Yes.
Yeah.
They were doing a missionary appointment and were abducted on their bus.
But the glory
Yes.
of heaven is
Yes.
worth
I
every,
think that key word can't be compared, you know. We talk about these horrible dreams that literally made him ill physically. But that word cannot be compared to what awaits us. I love that.
okay, any other comments? We will take up chapter 9 next time. We appreciate you guys being with us.
Oh,
Bye,
thank
Larry.
you.
Bye, Brenda.
Bye.
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 Sunday.
Bye.